Texas loved by Weston Ford. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Sweetwater, Texas, as Emma Rodriguez pulled her beat-up Ford pickup into the parking lot of the Nolan County Rodeo grounds. At 28, Emma was a study in contrasts, her long dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, work-worn hands that could just as easily wrangle cattle as they could play a delicate guitar riff, and eyes that held both determination and a hint of long-buried dreams. Emma hopped out of the truck, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust as she made her way to the registration booth. The annual Sweetwater Rodeo was more than just a competition. It was a lifeline for her family's struggling ranch. The prize money could mean the difference between keeping their land and being forced to sell to the big agricultural corporations circling like vultures. As she approached the booth, Emma's steps faltered. Standing there, looking as infuriatingly handsome as ever, was Luke Callahan. His cowboy hat was tipped back, revealing blonde hair and those piercing blue eyes that had once made her heart skip a beat. Now, they just made her pulse race with a mixture of anger and something else she didn't want to name. Luke spotted her, and his easy smile faltered for a moment before returning full force. "Well, if it isn't Emma Rodriguez, come to show us all how it's done again this year?" Emma squared her shoulders, meeting his gaze evenly. "You know it, Callahan. Someone's got to keep you boys humble." The registration volunteer, a plump, friendly-looking woman named Betsy, looked between them with poorly concealed interest. "Y'all know each other?" "You could say that," Emma muttered, reaching for the registration forms. Luke chuckled, the sound sending an unwelcome shiver down Emma's spine. "Emma and I go way back. High school sweethearts, if you can believe it." Emma shot him a glare. "Ancient history. We're just competitors now." As she filled out her forms, Emma couldn't help but sneak glances at Luke. He'd filled out since high school, his lanky frame now solid with muscle earned from years of ranch work and rodeo competition. He was talking animatedly with Betsy, his charm on full display, as he detailed his plans to finally beat Emma's barrel racing record. "In your dreams, Callahan?" Emma called out as she handed in her completed forms. Luke tipped his hat to her, a glint of challenge in his eyes. "We'll see about that, Rodriguez. May the best rider win." As Emma walked back to her truck, she tried to shake off the encounter. She had more important things to focus on than Luke Callahan and his stupid perfect smile. Her family was counting on her. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of beautiful Texas day that made Emma fall in love with her home state all over again. She arrived at the rodeo grounds early, leading her beloved quarter horse, Thunderbolt, to the stables. As she brushed Thunder's gleaming coat, a familiar voice called out, "He's looking good. Em, you've done a fine job with him." Emma turned to see Luke leading his own horse, a magnificent Palomino, into the neighboring stall. She bit back a sharp retort, instead focusing on the compliment to Thunder. "Thanks. Storm's not looking too shabby either." Luke patted his horse's neck affectionately. "He's got heart, that's for sure. But it'll take more than that to beat you too." There was a note of sincerity in his voice that caught Emma off guard. She looked at him closely, noticing for the first time the lines of fatigue around his eyes, the slight slump to his shoulders that his easy grin couldn't quite disguise. "Everything okay, Luke?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Luke's smile faltered for just a moment before returning. "Just the usual. Dad's medical bills are piling up, and the bank's been making noise about foreclosure. Nothing I can't handle." Emma felt a pang of sympathy. She knew all too well the struggles of trying to keep a family ranch afloat in changing times. "I'm sorry to hear that. If there's anything I can do." Luke's laugh held a hint of bitterness. "Unless you're planning on throwing the competition, I think we're both in the same boat, darlin'." The old term of endearment hung in the air between them, a reminder of easier times. Emma cleared her throat, suddenly needing to be anywhere else. "Well, good luck out there. And I mean that." As she led Thunder out to warm up, Emma couldn't shake the image of Luke's tired eyes. It was easier when she could think of him as the cocky boy who'd broken her heart all those years ago, riding off to chase rodeo glory while she stayed behind to help her family. This Luke, the one shouldering burdens so similar to her own, was harder to dismiss. The day passed in a blur of events. Emma watched from the sidelines as Luke competed in bull riding and calf roping, his skill evident in every smooth movement. When it came time for her barrel racing event, she pushed all thoughts of Luke from her mind, focusing solely on the connection between her and Thunder. As they burst out of the gate, the roar of the crowd faded away. There was only the pounding of hooves, the rush of wind, and the perfect harmony of horse and rider as they wove between the barrels. When they crossed the finish line, Emma knew even before the announcer called it, they'd beaten her own record. The crowd erupted in cheers, and as Emma slowed Thunder to a trot, she caught sight of Luke standing by the fence. The look of genuine admiration and pride on his face sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with the adrenaline of competition. That evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Emma found herself wandering towards the old oak tree behind the rodeo grounds. It had been their spot once where they'd shared dreams of rodeo stardom and a future together. To her surprise, Luke was already there, leaning against the gnarled trunk with 2 bottles of beer in hand. He held one out to her as she approached. "Figured you might come here. Old habits die hard, I guess." Emma accepted the bottle, clinking it against his in a silent toast. For a long moment they stood in companionable silence, watching the sun sink lower. "You were amazing out there today," Luke finally said, his voice soft. "I always knew you had it in you." Emma turned to look at him, really look at him. For the first time in years. Gone was the brash teenager who'd left her behind. In his place was a man who'd been humbled by life, who carried responsibilities as heavy as her own. "Thanks," she said, meaning it. "You weren't so bad yourself. That dismount in the bull riding was something else." Luke chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, well, desperation is a hell of a motivator. Dad's treatments aren't getting any cheaper." Emma felt a surge of empathy. "I get it. We're one bad season away from losing the ranch ourselves." "It's not right," Luke said, a hint of anger in his voice. "Our families have worked this land for generations. We shouldn't have to fight so hard just to keep what's ours." Emma nodded, taking a swig of her beer. "Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. If maybe we should just sell up, move to the city like everyone else." Luke turned to her, his eyes intense. "Do you really mean that?" "Because the Emma I knew would never give up on her home, her heritage." "Maybe I'm not the Emma you knew anymore," she shot back, but there was no real heat in her words. "No," Luke said softly. "You're not. You're stronger, more determined. And a hell of a lot more beautiful, if that's even possible." Emma felt her cheeks flush, and not just from the beer. "Luke." He set his bottle down, taking a step closer. "I owe you an apology, Em. For leaving the way I did, for thinking the rodeo circuit was more important than what we had here. I was young and stupid, and I've regretted it every day since." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She'd imagined this moment so many times over the years, but now that it was here, she found herself at a loss for words. Luke pressed on, his voice low and earnest. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or for things to go back to how they were, but I am asking for a chance. A chance to show you that I've changed, that I understand now what really matters." He reached out, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "What do you say, Em? Think you might have room in your life for one more lost cause?" Emma looked into his eyes, seeing reflected there the same fears, hopes, and dreams that she carried. Slowly, giving him every chance to pull away, she leaned in. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted of beer, dust, and long-buried feelings finally breaking free. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Emma couldn't help but laugh. "You know Callahan, for a smooth-talking cowboy, that was a pretty cheesy line." Luke grinned, pulling her close. "Yeah, well, it worked, didn't it?" As the first stars began to twinkle in the deepening twilight, Emma and Luke sat beneath the old oak tree, talking long into the night. They shared their struggles, their hopes for the future, and began to dream of what they might accomplish together. The next morning, as they stood side by side watching the sunrise paint the Texas sky in brilliant hues, an idea began to take shape. What if, instead of competing against each other, they joined forces? With Emma's skill in training horses and Luke's head for business, they could transform their struggling family ranches into a successful equine therapy program. It would allow them to keep their land, honor their heritage, and give back to the community that had supported them for so long. As the days turned to weeks and months, Emma and Luke worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. There were setbacks and challenges, of course, skeptical family members, mountains of paperwork, and the ever-present financial pressures. But with each obstacle overcome, their bond grew stronger. They held their first equine therapy session on a warm spring day, almost a year to the day since that fateful rodeo. As they watched a group of children with special needs light up with joy as they interacted with the gentle horses, Emma felt Luke's arms slip around her waist. "You know," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I spent years chasing glory in the rodeo circuit. thinking that's what would make me happy. But this, being here with you, doing something that matters, this is better than any 8-second ride or shiny belt buckle. Emma leaned into him, her heart full. Who would have thought? The two most stubborn people in Sweetwater, finally figuring out that we're stronger together than apart. Luke chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. Well, they do say everything's bigger in Texas, including hard-headed determination. As the Texas sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in a breathtaking array of colors, Emma and Luke stood hand in hand, looking out over the land that had shaped them. They had found in each other not just a partner in love, but a kindred spirit in their dedication to preserving a way of life while adapting to changing times. Their story was just beginning, a tale of two hearts as vast as the Texas sky, as enduring as the rugged landscape that had forged them, and as full of promise as a Lone Star sunrise. In the fading light of day, with the gentle nickering of horses in the background and the weight of shared dreams between them, Emma and Luke looked forward to a lifetime of adventures, each day writing a new chapter in their journey of love, perseverance, and the unbreakable spirit of Texas.